I I grew accustomed to it. I I grew to the point where the drill instructors would yell at me and try to make me falter and stutter and this and that, and I could stand tall and say, "Yes, sir."
So, welcome, Al. For anybody who doesn't know who you are, can you give us a brief introduction as to who you are and where you come from?
Yeah, I'm Albert Slater. I'm ex-Marine, uh, born the 1939 in Los Angeles, California, to a immigration type family. My parents were the firstborn, and my grandparents came from either Russia or either Ukraine. So they were immigrants, and it was a down-to-earth, honest, no bullshit family, and they loved me and my siblings with all their hearts. I had an older sister, 4 years my senior, an older brother, 2 years my senior, a younger sister, 6 years my junior, and they planned to have two children, but the others were love children, myself included, and I said, "Am I any less than what you planned?" And they said, "No, we love you with all our hearts. You're $1 million to us." And that's the type of family it was. Not a lot of money, not a lot of luxury, but good hearts and good planning and good ideas. And I was lucky to be raised by them. So when I was in preschool, I was silent and a little bit scared. When I got in grammar school, the first grade, they did a test for all the students, and they pulled my parents in along with me and said, "You have turned positive for attention deficit disorder." And that means that you can't remember things. And that means that you're not going to be able to compete in the academic world. And you will keep you in school. If you study and stay there, you can graduate high school, but you won't ever be able to go to college. And I thought, geez, that's going to make me a dependent for the rest of my life to my parents, who they don't need that, and I want my freedom. And I was crushed, and it did change a portion of my life. There was no special ed. There was no one that said you can work your way out of this and be normal. And so I just kind of went along with my classmates and tried to be accepted. I was athletic during recess time. That was my moment. And went to a school in Venice. That's part of the old shore facility for Los Angeles. They tried to make it equal to Venice, Italy, in my dad's day. And it was a great, fun-loving place to live. I went fishing when I wasn't going to school, catching mackerel on the Oceanside Pier and selling it to the Jewish. And I guess I was kind of Jewish, but we never went to study it. One of my greatest thrills was save enough money to go around the corner to a restaurant that sold bagels with lox on it, and that was wow, bagels with lox on it. That was heaven. So,
what is lux?
Lox is sliced salmon, very thin and smoked, and it's really delicious.
Sounds good.
Yeah, expensive. I still eat it. My wife buys it for me.
Okay.
But so we were doing pretty good. I was going through school, and went to the same schools my dad went to. Got in high school, in junior high school rather. Met a couple of classmates that had moved in at that time. One was a good friend of mine named Ron Tebben, who came from Iowa, a little Iowa place, and I guess they sold their farm and moved to Los Angeles and bought a house in Venice. And the other one, wild guy. His name was Larry Olson. His mother brought him to Venice from Minnesota, and I guess he'd been through all kinds of hell raiser. And Ron was a student. He got straight A's all the time. His goal was to go to the Naval Academy and become a flyer, an aviator. And Larry, he just wanted to have fun. He smoked, had a girlfriend they had sex with at an early age, raised hell. And so between the two of them, I really had a good time. But I managed to get decent grades and went on to high school. And in high school, I was playing football in my brother's position because he moved on to college. He graduated. But he was 6'4" and probably maybe 230 pounds. I was 5'11", maybe 190 pounds. And the tackle position is difficult.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, especially.
It really is.
Yeah.
And but I did pretty well in high school. But Larry and I would dream. And we dreamt about adventure. Let's see the world. This high school life is kind of dull. And it's going nowhere for us. And we're not superstars and athletes and this and that. He played basketball. And we dreamt about dropping out of school, lying about our age, getting on a trans steamer, and just working our way all around the world to see different places and all of that. Or lying and join the Marine Corps and go to boot camp. And my dad got a hold of us, and he said, there's a better way to do it. He said, join the Reserve Marine camp organization that's right here in Santa Monica. And you could work with them and learn about the Marine Corps. And then when you graduate high school, you can go on to boot camp and as a reservist. And so we stuck it out. And we did that. We graduated high school. And the reserve platoon that we belonged to went to boot camp, MCRD San Diego. And it was a shock of our lives. I mean, when they put us in a platoon, a cross-section of America platoon, we probably had about 57 youngsters from all over. There were Native Americans, there were blacks, a lot of Hispanics, and plenty of whites. And, you know, we were in a state of shock because the drill instructor, the team, they climbed on us from day one for 3 to 4 months. They treated us like worms, like we didn't exist. We shouldn't even be alive. We should be ashamed. We weren't people. We were recruits, and nothing lower than a recruit. And they were tough, and they tore us down and made us scared. One of the things they did to catch our attention was they instilled in our platoon one of their own men who acted like a recruit. And one day he mouthed off at them. And so they walked us over to a dumpster, and we had M1 rifles assigned to us, and they had some with the blanks in them. And he mouthed off at them again. So they shot him with these blanks, and he fell dead. And he ordered a couple of new recruits in the platoon to pick him up, throw him in the dumpster. And they turned to us and said, "That's just the beginning. You foul around, and if you don't put 100% effort forward and obey our instructions, it's going to happen to you."
So they took this. This was a drill sergeant that they put in the platoon.
Yeah.
But you guys didn't know that, obviously.
No.
He mouthed off to them.
Wow.
And they pretended to shoot him to scare you guys.
Yeah, and they scared us.
Oh,
they had our attention. There was no rebellion.
You said, where do we go from here?
And we knew that the drill instructor team was supervised by officers in a regular platoon and a regular company that laid the law on them as to protect us. They didn't want us to run away. They just want us to get hurt. They made sure that we got enough sleep. We hit the rack at 2100, 9 o'clock at night. We woke up at probably 5:45 in the morning. We got enough food. We learned to march. We learned to shoot. We learned everything about the Marine Corps. But the drill instructors in between, they wouldn't leave us alone. I mean, they were tough. Which at the time, Larry and I would look at each other and shake our heads saying, what the hell did we get into? You know? But he wouldn't quit, and I wouldn't quit. And a lot of people at night would just couldn't take it, and they get out and sneak out and run to the fence, climb the fence. So they were always making roll call, and that was good, you know. And so about halfway through, maybe 1/4 way through, we were able to march. We understood their instructions, how to deal with the drill instructors. Say, sir, Private so-and-so wants this and this, and asked. One night I got very sick, and I got out of the rack and went in and said, sir, Private Slater is sick, and he needs help, and he's burning up. And the drill instructor put his hand on my head, and it was wet and sweaty, and he said, punched me in the belly, and he said, in the morning you go to sick call.
He punched you in the belly?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
They wanted to make sure that we weren't weak, and we could expect anything from them, and they were tough, and we stick it out. So I did. I went to sick call, but the sickness had gone. It was just kind of a burning cold.
Oh, like a flu.
Yeah. And we had a week of service where we worked in the mess hall, the dining facilities and stuff like that, helping the cooks. The cooks tried to pretend that they were drill instructors too, but they didn't have the clout. But whenever they yell at us and scream at us and give us a cheap shot, somebody would say, don't eat the eggs this morning. Private so-and-so spit in them. And so we wouldn't eat the eggs that morning, you know. And that was pretty bad. Everybody else ate the eggs, including the drill instructors, you know. And,
okay.
So that's the way it worked.
That's the way you get back at them.
Yeah, that was. But after a while, something happened to me, and I couldn't figure out why. I grew accustomed to it. I grew to the point where the drill instructors would yell at me and try to make me falter and stutter and this and that, and I could stand tall and say, yes, sir. And I wouldn't fluster. They couldn't shake me. I figured this is the way it is. And I know I'm not going to die, because if they do something wrong, they're going to be in trouble. The officers are watching too, you know?
Right.
And I got stronger and stronger and stronger. And this ADD thing, I never even thought about it. That we went to the rifle range, we'd shoot, we hiked. Whenever we screwed up as a platoon, we'd run with our 10-pound M1 rifles in the air over our heads until we almost dropped. But I felt good, physically and mentally. And I felt like I don't have any hang-ups anymore. I can do anything I set my mind to do. If I can survive this, I can survive hell.
That's right.
And, you know, that's the way it was. And we graduated one day. They called us Marines. We marched together. We were so proud. We loved each other in the platoon. We really did, because we adhered together under all this hell. And they tried to get us to sign our contract for a 4-year hitch. And I said, no, we're reservists. I'm going to get out. I'm going to go to college. And I did get out, went to college, junior college, Pierce Junior College in the Valley, played football, signed up for a PE major, and I got decent grades. I refused to take my dad's hard-earned money, so I washed dishes when I wasn't in college.
Oh, wow.
A lot of the other kids, you know, they had a freebie, all their free time off, but I was really mindset. Like, I don't want to be a dependent anymore. I want to show them that I can do it on my own. After 2 years at Pierce, I went to Fresno State. And again, I was a PE major, tried to play football, but it was a different quality football there. I mean, these were good athletes. They were playing major colleges. And again, I couldn't do what they did. And Ray, my older brother, got in a car accident and was brain injured. And he was no longer, in fact, could do anything, really. My sister, my dad went to watch a World Series. My dad won the trip, a World Series in baseball back
Who was
east.
playing? Do you know?
Yeah, New York and Boston.
Okay.
And when they came back, they were thrilled, but she was hit with polio.
Oh, no.
Yeah, and she was crippled. And so I was the third one, but I was still strong. And when we were in college, the Marine Corps came in and tried to sign people up for an officer program. And I said to myself, my God, I thought officers were born officers. They didn't recruit them like they did enlisted. And I told them my story in boot camp, and they normally didn't like what they call Mustangs, people who went through boot camp and were enlisted and then got into the officer corps. They wanted to keep them separate.
Right.
And the Marine Corps was, I think, prejudiced then. They wanted all white as much as possible. They wanted, quality people. And for the image, they were more interested in the officer image, I thought, because the Hispanics and blacks and Native Americans were just as strong, if not stronger, than the rest of us, And that's the way I grew up. I swore to myself, someday I'd like to be an officer and I'd like to lead Marines in combat. And that was the thing I was going for. So I signed up for the program. During the summer break in college, they flew us to Quantico, where it was kind of an officer boot camp. And a lot of officers, candidates came from every college in the country. Northern colleges, high-quality colleges, deep down south, and we all banded together and they broke us into platoons and for training. And our platoon, they put into a Quonset hut where we would live. And we had one black candidate, a guy from San Francisco, who was a musician. And he wanted to be a Marine officer. And so when we got in the Quonset hut, a bunch of solid, deep South students said, we don't want to sleep in the same Quonset hut with a nigger. And boy, I never heard anything like that before. I knew it was prejudice, but I mean, that's pretty outspoken. And so I said something like this: why don't, for the time being, you guys sleep at that end, the Quonset hut, and we'll sleep at this end. And they didn't want to argue with the Marine Corps, and they said they'd get by with that. They'd just stay away from them. Well, we went through a lot of hell in the Quantico area. A lot of learning to march, a lot of harassment from a drill instructor, a lot of competition. They pushed us hard, but not as hard as the MCRD, the recruit depot. And they would get in my face and try to get me excited and break down and back off. And I was just so calm, having gone through boot camp. I knew exactly what they were doing. And it kind of bothered them that I wouldn't get flustered. And so they just left me alone. And I knew we were a platoon and we were trying to do well in competition with other platoons. And one of the first things that came up was we were going to run 3 miles with our 10-pound M1 rifles. And whichever platoon had the best time, they were going to be honored. Well, the one thing they didn't mention was, and I knew the Marine Corps always thought in terms of platoon time, unit time. That unit is what matters, not the superstars that knew how to run fast. So I talked to these guys and I said, let's do this. When our run begins and they start timing us, we'll all go off together, and there'll be a group of us staying behind to help those Marines that are having trouble, the ones that are going to collapse. They can't carry the rifles in a 90-degree sweating temperature, and we're going to do it. We're going to make it as a platoon. We'll take the rifles and run with them and help them along. And when we all get to the finish line, we'll go across the finish line as a platoon. Now, I know some of you are super athletes. You could probably set records in the Olympics, and you don't want to be fostered by these guys that are just slow, that are probably mentally more alert than all of us. But let's make it that we're a platoon. We do things together. And they bought off on it. They didn't like it, but they bought off on it. So it worked. A group of us got in the back, and the fast runners took off with the rifles. And we, as the week started floundering, we would help them. And we wouldn't embarrass them. They're part of our platoon. They're our brothers, damn it. And we take the rifles. We even put an arm around a guy when he was stumbling, and hurting. But we all made it. We all made it to the finish line. And at the finish line, we gave the rifles back, and we went across as a platoon with our rifles. And we won. We won. And they were beginning to see that it's not an individual effort all the time. It's a team effort. We help one another. It's like in combat, when somebody falls, you don't wander on after the enemy. You make sure that the guy that fell gets some kind of help so they can stay alive, And these are your brothers. Well, it was shorter and it was easier than boot camp, but I loved it. And toward the end, when we were all in the squad bay cleaning our rifles and singing and then enjoying the fact that we're going back to college, and this was a good experience, and we hope to see you guys later. Our black Marine, or black student from San Francisco was among them, among the Southerners. And I said, "Hey, can I ask a question?" They said, "Yeah." So remember what you said? When we came into this platoon, you said you didn't want to be in the same Quonset hut with a nigger. And now you guys are brothers, and you're laughing together. And one of them pipped up and said, "Well, that's because the black people in the West, especially maybe San Francisco, they're different kind of people than the niggers in the Deep South."
It's all ignorance.
Yeah, ignorance. The ignorance just stood out. We didn't even say anything about it anymore.
Good.
But it was good. So I graduated Fresno State College in 1962 with a commission. I wore my whites. I had my sword. And I was so proud that I was an officer. I never thought I could be an officer when I was in boot camp. And they put up with me. And they normally don't like officers that have been in boot camp. There's a divide in the Marine Corps.
Right.
And they normally don't like officers.
But the enlisted guys really like officers who have been
because they understand them.
Right. Exactly.
You're right. They understand what they've been through. And the officers have no deep feeling for what the enlisted have been through.
Right.
And I said, I love that platoon in boot camp. I love the enlisted. My greatest thrill in life is one day to be in combat and lead enlisted, lead a platoon or a company or whatever. But
not to foreshadow, but your wish came true.
It came through, but I had to fight for it. And I'll tell you about it. My first duty station was Hawaii. They did me a beautiful favor, sending me to the 4th Marines, Kaneohe, Hawaii, which was Oahu, and I was a platoon commander, and I had good leadership, good training. I mean, we would do training over all the islands, jungle, jungle canopies. We did all the tactics. It was wonderful. And
Did you guys fly from island to island, or did you guys take a ship?
we would take Amtraks. We'd make landings,
Oh, okay.
with the small
The
craft.
amphibious assault vehicles.
Yeah. And we would go aboard larger ships and then pop off with a land. And it was a practice amphibious landing because Marines are amphibious.
Right.
And we went through all the tactics. The Big Island, we saw the volcanoes, and we did every tactic imaginable in the book. And it was wonderful. And then while I was there, a thing came up. They asked for volunteers that might want to be air observers. And as well as an air observer, there's a double job. You become the head of the school that teaches jungle warfare. So I volunteered for that. I figured I'm still leading Marines. That's what matters.
So the air observer is a person who's on the ground observing for the air assets, correct?
No, it's a little bit further.
Okay.
He's a guy that belongs on the ground, but this ability is he's flying in the back seat of a Cessna or in the left seat of a helicopter, and he's calling in artillery or naval gunfire or even airstrikes from the air.
Got it.
He's talking to the guys on the ground to make sure that we got it right. And
yeah, they had in Vietnam, they had the 152s, the Cessna 152s, and they would fly around.
And the Army has had whole companies that flew Cessnas, and they were excellent pilots.
Yeah, a lot of people don't know that. I fly.
Do you?
Yeah, and
they could stay up a long time because they weren't burning a lot of fuel like a helicopter.
Right.
They had excellent communications, and the pilots, the pilots was a partner to me. If I got overwhelmed with too much going on, and the pilot would pick up some of it, and it was just wonderful. But I volunteered for it, and I got it. In order to train me for the Jungle Warfare School, which is great for Vietnam, and also for Hawaii, they sent me to a British Jungle Warfare School in Johor Bahru, just south of China and in the deepest jungles we've ever seen. And being British, they had the school down. They had a little pamphlet, and they told you how to conduct yourself as a guerrilla or against guerrillas. And it was interesting, really interesting. We had a lot of physical fitness, and we had some liberty in Singapore.
Oh, did you?
Which was interesting, yeah. And I
Why was it interesting?
Well, Singapore, is kind of a fun thing, and a thing all by itself. In Asia, it belongs to China, but China, being communist, would like to have it back. But they had a lease for so many years where they were free, and their merchants could do what they wanted to do and not be communist.
Oh, I wonder how that works.
But
that's interesting.
The lease petered out, and I don't know what their status is.
Yeah, I think they're part of the United Arab Emirates.
Are they?
I could be completely wrong.
Of course, when China wanted them back to be communist, they didn't want to go there. So
maybe they're their own thing at this point.
They couldn't fight China. So it was interesting and really fun to see that part of the world. So there I am, running a guerrilla warfare school for the 4th Marines, and we had plenty of backcountry, mountains.
You were a captain at this time?
I was still a lieutenant.
Still a lieutenant, okay.
And we had all kinds of wild fruit. It was paradise. To me, I was great. I was still single, and I could go into Honolulu and have a good time. I learned to surf, and I volunteered for a Marine civilian jump outfit. So I jumped from free dive. It scared the hell out of me.
Oh, I bet.
I'm not a good jumper because I just didn't want to push off from that
It's the
aircraft.
whole jumping aspect of it,
Oh,
huh?
man. I had my reserve chute, too, so I was ready to go.
Yeah.
But and I would always hit hard. Even if I rolled, I always hit hard in the end. But it was an experience,
Mm-hmm.
And I was young and full of life and dreaming about leading Marines in combat. So all of a sudden, this Vietnam thing came up, and the 4th Marines, they were given orders to move to Vietnam. Well, I was part of the 4th Marines, but I got separate orders. My orders said, you're to report to CVA 61. And I said, what the hell's that? They said, it's a ship. And I said, what kind? They said, aircraft carrier. I said, what am I going to do aboard an aircraft carrier with all my training and everything? And where do I report? And they said, that's secret. And I said, well, how can I report to something?
That I don't.
And they say, you report where it stops to pick up its mail. So I went to Midway. I was on Midway Island for maybe a week or so, and a little plane came in, picked up the mail. And I jumped on that, joined the Ranger, the USS Ranger. And an aircraft carrier in a combat zone is surrounded by protective ships.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's a fleet within itself because they don't want anybody to get near that carrier and knock it out.
Right.
And so I was a XO Marine Detachment, USS Ranger, and they were going to San Francisco, coming off a tour to North Vietnam, and they were planning to go on the next tour in a few months. And so I was excited about it. But it's a long ways from leading Marines in combat.
Yeah, you're carrying Marines to combat.
We had 57 Marines on the ship, and each one of them had top secret clearance, and they protected super special weapons.
Mm-hmm.
They had their own holds. They ran the brig. They protected the captain. If the captain ever went ashore, they were with him. They were driving for him, taking care of him, make sure he was protected. And they protected, they ran the brig. The captain had office hours. Somebody screwed up. He went to the brig. He was ours, And so it was really interesting. And we were always treated special because, only 57 Marines, over 5,000 Navy people. And then the Naval Air came aboard with all of their aircraft in, and that was interesting. And so I was accepted both by Naval Air as well as the ship's side. And when they had steaks for a night, dinner, I would eat on the seaside, and then I'd run over to the air side and eat a double steak.
Smart man.
Yeah. And I met my wife in San Francisco. We fell in love. And just before the ship was going to leave.
How did you meet her?
There was a gal in San Francisco who was keeping the car for the guy that I was replacing. She took care of the car. And she held a little party and a dance. And my wife, I knew her from somewhere else, and she was there. And I met her, and we dated, and we fell in love. And the time was so short. She's from Garden City, New York, and her parents, loved San Francisco too. And she didn't want to leave them out of our marriage, and I didn't want to leave my parents out. But there was no time, so we eloped. We went to Reno.
Oh, did you?
Yeah.
Wow.
And, fell in love, and we were so much in love, and I had to tell her it was really hard. Please don't make me end my dreams in the Marine Corps, my future in the Marine Corps. I said, I love you dearly, and I would die for you. But this is just something that's so great for me, I can't walk away from it. And she said, sure, she would accept that. She was teaching a school. And
good for her. That's awesome.
So the tour in Vietnam on that Ranger was listed as a tour in country, meaning I was in combat one tour, and I said I want to waive that, meaning I want to go back. I want to go to Vietnam.
Mm-hmm.
I would probably could have stayed back in another job for 3 years, because since I had a tour in Vietnam, and we didn't see any action, and the air wing was great. We would hear them take off and land, and they didn't lose any planes. I know they had some combat, but tangled a little bit with the MiGs in Hanoi, but they didn't do much damage, and they just made a presence. And I got vibes just from people that the President of the United States was trying to rile them up so they would declare war against us. He wanted to get into Vietnam. He wanted the whole U.S. in Vietnam, so that
So at the time that you went there, we weren't at war with Vietnam.
No.
So you were on a ship, just outside, like off the coast of Vietnam.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I went to Vietnam, and I kissed my wife goodbye and said, I'm going to be back. My dreams are going to come true. And I got to Vietnam, and they assigned me to the 3rd Marine Division. And I said, can I get down with the grunts, meaning the fighters? They said, no, we're shorthanded on air observers. And I said, oh, man, maybe I could get down to them later. And so I got into the air observer thing, and I was the only one flying for the division up there. And let me describe Vietnam. Vietnam they were having their own little war between the North and the South. They had a DMZ, demilitarized zone, and the North was communist. The South were non-communists. They were Catholic and strongly against the North. And the DMZ was a river. It ran east and west. And the west, it flowed from the west, and normally it was so high that it was difficult for a unit to cross the river because of the water. But there were low water marks, and so there was a lot of action across the river, the DMZ. And so I reviewed everything that I knew about being an AO, and I found an Army aviation company, really superb company, quality, mechanics and everything, food, whatever. They flew Cessnas. And I was amazed that there would be a company that would be flying Cessnas. My other alternative was VMO. That was a unit in the division that flew helicopters, gunships, on call type thing.
Right.
They'd fly VIPs and generals and stuff like that.
Okay.
So I was glad to fly in a Cessna, and it would stay up forever. Had wonderful communications. And the pilots were super. They would do anything that I asked them to do. We'd fly at treetop level. And they were courageous. And they were looking for actions too. And some of them were warrant officers. And one was a black captain. I think he was probably one of the seniors in the unit. And so, I loved the Army because they didn't have the Marine Corps hang-up. And I got into it. It was wonderful because when a ground unit was engaged and in trouble up near the demilitarized zone, they called for help. And I would come. I would be assigned to them. I would talk to the ground unit commander and find out what the situation was and ask what he wanted. And I offered, whatever we had available. Sometimes air. Sometimes it was just artillery. Sometimes it was a naval gunfire ship offshore. But we had all of that to our calling.
Wow.
And and I got pretty good at it. So I call in whenever the aircraft were coming, and I get on their channel and call in and tell them where we were. And they couldn't use grid coordinates because they flew too fast. They would be across our field maps in a minute.
Oh, right.
So they used a different kind of navigation. And so I called them in on that navigation, and I told them my altitude and the situation and everything else. And there usually 4 aircraft would come in. And the number 1 aircraft, they would call it. It would be 1, 2, 3, and 4. The number 1 aircraft was the commander of that flight. And these guys were good. I couldn't believe how good they were. Like, I would get up and fly out maybe at 9 in the morning. They would be up at first light because they had to have their meetings. They had to check out their weapons and their aircraft and what kind of ordnance they were carrying, so nothing would go wrong. And but we met at the place, and I'd guide them in and tell them as they were coming in what the situation was and who they were defending and what a run-in heading they would be taking, and that I would adjust each aircraft as it came in for the bombing or the napalm or something like that. And it was exciting. They were so responsive. And they would come in and drop their ordnance. And we never had a friendly wounded or dead, killed by a bombing, except one. One guy, he was told to get down, damn it, into your fighting hole, because there's gonna be some heavy ordnance coming in. He wanted to watch it. He jumped out and he looked and he got blown away. Huh? There's no way that we could stop it. We had one time, we had napalm. We were coming in to bomb them with napalm, and it was a village. We were burning out an old village because the enemy had taken over that village, and this is what they were fighting from. Well, as they came in, they had their first tour over the target was a dummy no drop, because they wanted to see everything. And we put a smoke bomb in there and gave them their heading. And as they came in on this one, up on the hill adjacent to this village, all of the people in the village are up there waving, and they had their flag in the air, meaning you're burning our village, damn it. Oh. And they went through and they made the big turn to come around again for the bombing. And the number 1 pilot, the crew chief, the crew number 1 leader, asked me, he said, who are those people on the hill waving and with their flag and everything? And I told him, I said, the Viet Cong come across at night, and they want their loyalty. And if they don't get it, they kill the leader. And then the Americans come across in the daytime, and if they get resistance, they come down hard on the villagers, and the villagers are taking a horrible beating. In this case, they tried to satisfy the Viet Cong, and they had to dig tunnels and everything else to fight from, and the ground unit couldn't take it anymore, and they said, we're wiping out this village. Well, the leader all of a sudden said, I don't think we have enough gasoline or fuel to complete this mission. Smart and man. I thought to myself, oh my God, I wish I could shake his hand and give him a hug, because I didn't want to wipe it. Yeah, burn out that village.
Absolutely.
They didn't have anything else. They lived there all their lives, and they had no place to go. And their food source was there, and they were all standing there waving and hope that the pilot would have enough compassion not to burn out that village, and he did.
Wow.
And I was just amazed. So anyway, I said, I want to get a ground unit and lead Marines in combat. So I called my boss in the division, and his name was Fallon, and he said, we're short. You cannot leave unless you become an aide to the commanding general. So I said, I'll be an aide. And I knew I could get faster through the general to a company than anything else. And I was getting flight pay, and I was living a good life. In fact, for safety, when I'd fly into a conflict, the Viet Cong and the NVA, the bad guys, would see the Cessna and immediately cease fire and dig, because they knew what was they were going to get hit hard. So I was safe. They never fired at me. I could go at treetop level.
You never got fired at when you were that low.
When I got fired at when I wasn't running a mission. There wasn't anybody fighting on the ground. We saw a flash of metal or something, and I wanted to go down and investigate. And then the whole countryside had opened up on us, because they knew we didn't have anything besides our little Cessna. Fortunately, they have difficulty aiming on something that's airborne.
Yeah.
But it was just beautiful. I was safe, working with good people. I was getting flight pay. Anybody would love a job like that, But I wanted my goal, And I respected the Viet Cong. They were fighters and courageous. North Vietnamese were tremendous. And so I got a job with a general, the commanding general of 3rd Marine Division, as an aide. And he was on his way out. And he wasn't doing anything. He was living away from where the action was. And he'd fly around a little bit, but I made sure that he was protected, that we had weapons in the aircraft that I could, if he had the trouble, he had to land and he was fired upon, I could protect him and all of that. But when he left, a general came in from, Major General Hockmuth came in from Marine Corps Recruit Depot, Paris Island. And he was excited about being the commanding general of a division in action, in combat. So when he got there, he said, let's fly out and see what we've got. And he was disturbed because the division wasn't right. He was too far away. His residence was too far away from the action. And he wasn't getting response from the division. And he couldn't figure out what the hell was happening. So he kept flying around a lot to try to figure out what's going on. He says, I want to command this division, and I want this division to be effective as a DMZ. And naturally, and I respected his enthusiasm and judgment. He would fly, when he flew in a helicopter. It was and he would have a chase helicopter. So it took a lot of people of our helicopters away for him. And they had guns, and he would endanger himself to try to get into unison combat to find out what was happening. And he couldn't figure out, his chain of command wasn't responsive to him. And he says, I don't know. And after a while, I said, sir, I'd like to have a company. And a big smile came across his face. He said, you got it. Tomorrow morning, you're going to be a company commander.
Wow.
How about that? He was so excited about it.
He was excited to have somebody who knew how the chain of command was going to work and knew him.
And he was going to call me up later and try to find out what the hell was happening.
Right.
So I go down, and 9th Marines said, you're going to be a company commander, but you have to wait your turn. Meaning you have to wait and do other jobs until the company comes available. And I said, I don't have a lot of time. And the general said I could have a company right now. And they gave me a company. But they held it against me. Like here was a VIP snoop coming in from the general. And I said, what the hell's happening to my Marine Corps? The general wants to contribute, and this isn't the way the Marine Corps works, damn it. Well, here's what I found out. I got the company. The young Marines were a little bit shattered from past combat. Most of them were right out of boot camp. And I said, "Where's our chain of command? We have squad leaders, we have platoon leaders, we have enlisted NCOs. We rely on that hardcore NCO leadership.
Mm-hmm.
We really do." But they weren't there, and they would replace our casualties with a bunch of recruits that went through basic training, and I called up and I said, I need the regular structure of the Marine Corps for us to be effective. And they said, no. They said, for some reason or other, we're getting more casualties than anybody else. We're in more contact than anybody else. All the people down south, or the other divisions, are getting the NCOs. And I said, is there any way I can change that? And they said, no. And I said, it's alien to what the Marine Corps is all about. And they knew it was, but they were shattered too. And the colonel in charge of the 9th Marines, the battery actually, the Minette Senior, was good. He was really good. He called me up and he said, I've been instructed to build a patch of barren ground parallel to the DMZ, on our side of the DMZ. And he said, I want you to come in and defend the building of that when the bulldozers come in and all of that. And then he, on his own, he threw this in. He said, I don't know where this came from, this instruction. He said, it's against solid military principle to do something like that, but I'm going to do it. And he says, I think it's coming from Washington, and nobody's going to challenge it because our supreme commander's the president of the United States. You don't question his instructions. So we built it, and fortunately we didn't have any problem with it. And I had a lot of defense as the tractors cut through the land and built that strip. And then they tried to put watchtowers on it. Again, coming from Washington. The watchtowers were knocked down overnight.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So I'm saying, God, I'm starting to feel like the Marines can't make their own judgment calls. Really bothers me. When we got in there, we were still carrying our M14s, the 7.62, semi-automatic. All of the Viet Cong and North Vietnamese Army soldiers were carrying automatic AK-47s with big clip, big
30 round magazines.
Yeah. So every one of them had a machine gun.
Mm-hmm.
They overpowered us. And, we knew our weapons, but how in the hell do you go up against that kind of firepower? So they had this little treatment program. They brought in the M16s, first time we ever saw them. And they showed us how to use them and how to clean them and how to fire them and all of that. And at first the Marines were happy because they were light.
Oh yeah,
and they could carry a lot of ammunition, and they had equal firepower.
Right.
One of our first assignments was to go down to a place called the Street Without Joy. It was a street the French used to use to get from North to South Vietnam, and every time they went through that street, they were attacked, and it was they had a firefight, and it was a minefield. They get out to fight, and they'd be tripping mines, bouncing Betty mines, terrible things. They would bounce up and explode and cut you in half. and it was a nightmarish thing. Well, an author wrote a book about it, and I called it Street Without Joy. When I was with a general, the author came back to see the street because it was still in friendly hands. And there was a Marine, a gunny sergeant with him to protect him. And a mortar round started coming in, so everybody panicked and ran out, tripped the mines, and they were killed. And we got a call. My boss got a call, and he was told to go down the street without joy. He doesn't know where it comes from, but he does it, with a whole battalion. He wants to go down with a whole battalion. And he goes at night so that maybe we could do we could surprise him. At least they told him that there was a unit that crossed the DMZ and went down to that street. So we go down to that street, and fortunately we led, and we got down there. Well, it was still dark, and in the morning he sent a company in to find this unit that was down there. This unit fired on him with automatic weapons. He got everybody together and went into the advancement to charge. And all of their M16, new M16s, jammed.
No.
In the assault, they jammed. And he was killed, and most of his men were killed. And it was a nightmare.
Oh, man.
Did they find out why they were jamming?
Yeah. They immediately sent me in, my company, to try to solidify the situation, but we had the same M16s. Fortunately, the enemy had pulled back and gone. So we tried to pick up their dead and wounded and clear up the mess. I think we killed one bad guy, but the rest were gone. And I got on the hook, and I said, we want our M14s back. And they said, they're gone.
No.
So we had to live with these things. Well, we got away by helicopter and got back, and I found that maybe we had a different lot, but we were taking care of our weapons, oiling them, everything, and they worked. And it was discovered that it was one lot of ammunition was a powder problem.
Oh, it was the ammunition, not the
M16.
weapon. Okay, good.
And when they fired these things, the first cartridge went in the chamber, and when the primer was hit, it would explode, the bullet would go out, but it would expand the casing so that it became part of the chamber.
Right.
And the next one would rip off the back of the chamber to pull it out,
cartridge.
to extract it, and it was totally useless.
Wow.
And so there went one company.
So it took a company to figure that out. That's what it cost. That was the cost.
And I don't know how far that lot of ammunition went, but there was a quick investigation so that we could still be effective. And our Marines were really kind of upset.
Yeah, rightfully so. Yeah, that's terrible.
So we were always in action. They sent us after a mortar unit, a Viet Cong mortar unit that was very effective. We could see the flashes at night, and they would be hitting our support agencies, artillery and this and that. And they would always be firing at night. And so we went out and tried to find them, and we found them. And but the thing was, they had a constructed base in South Vietnam, and they weren't going to leave it. It was really well built. They had a zigzag trench lines and bunkers and camouflage and stuff that we'd never seen before. And they were big and strong. And they had the elevation, and we went after them, and they tore us apart because they were stronger than we were. I called for artillery, and it was denied. And they said, no, you can't have artillery because it could very easily be injuring friendlies. And I said, geez, what do we got? I couldn't get air. I couldn't get artillery. My Marines were pinned down. I got out there behind my Marines, and when they were on their bellies, this fire was coming from them from concealed positions. And finally, the firing stopped, and I figured the guy had to run out of ammunition. He had been firing for 30 minutes, steady. And then I could see from my position where he was when he got out of his fighting hole. And he stood there for a moment. And I went a little bit insane. I should have never have done this. I ran forward through where my Marines were pinned down, and I asked them to cover me. And I ran up to where this guy was. And his back was to me. He was wanting somebody to give him some more ammunition. And he was taller than I was. And I said, this is unusual. And as he turned, he had a smile on his face until he saw the 45 pointed at him, point blank. And the smile disappeared, and he knew he was going to die. And he tried to reach for the last of his ammunition, and I killed him. And then I grabbed his AK-47 and ran like hell because I knew somebody was going to come up there and help him. Well, this was a turning point in my life. When it's easy to kill somebody you hate that's trying to kill you from afar. But this guy was defenseless.
How close was he?
And he was happy at one moment, and then he knew he was going to die. I could just see it in his face, and I knew I couldn't hesitate because he would find a way to either get away or get me. So I put 4 or 5 rounds in him and grabbed it and ran. And I thought about that afterwards. If he had been able to, we had a common language, I would try to get him as a POW. I didn't want to kill him because I knew he probably had a family at home just like I did. And I said, maybe I'm not a killer, but I'm still a good Marine. I thought about that a long time. I carried that AK a long time.
How close were you to him when you
I must have been probably about 6 to 8 feet.
That close.
You know, that 45, you fired them before. That's a killer. That'll put them down. You know, you hit them anywhere, it's going to impact on them.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I love that weapon. And I might even put.
You know how many Marines you saved by pulling that trigger, though?
No. But it wasn't a conclusion, you know?
Yeah.
He was just one man. And you know what I figured out in the end? This base that they had established was taking a beating. And he didn't look like a regular run-of-the-mill troop. He looked like one of the leaders. And he had kind of a smile on his face of satisfaction, like I showed him that I could shoot too. Until he turned and he saw me, and then it all disappeared. And I thought maybe he was some kind of a supervisor. I don't know, but he was taller than I was, and that's unusual, you know, for Vietnamese. There's little short people, and so I carried that AK. I don't know. I never wanted to use it, but I just carried it for a long time until I could put it in a locker box someday.
Did you get to take it home?
I didn't. We weren't allowed to take that kind of stuff home, but it followed me because my name was in a locker. I had that AK. I had the magazine. I had their Chi-Com grenades. Did you ever see a Chi-Com grenade?
No.
It wasn't like the M26.
Okay.
It was a wooden handle, and on the end of the handle there was a big steel ball.
Oh, okay. I know what you're talking about. Yeah, then they would throw it with the handle.
Full of TNT.
Mm-hmm.
And then at the other end of the handle, there's a little cord that comes out, and you wrap that around your finger. And you throw it, and the cord breaks loose, I guess, a blasting cap. Blasting cap blows it apart. The shrapnel effect is nowhere as much of a killer as our grenade.
Right.
And the shrapnel is, big pieces. But the concussion is pretty big because that's TNT. But there were a lot of them on the ground that were faulty. So I picked one up and I cleaned it out, when we had a break. And I put that with my AK. That was
A live grenade, one that had already was a dud.
Yeah, it was a dud.
And you picked it up and you pulled all the TNT out of it?
Yeah. I disconnected all of the pieces.
It's a brave move.
Yeah. It was stupid. I did some stupid things.
I think we've all done a lot of stupid things. That's
I was fortunate to have survived that, and I was stupid to have done it because I was a company commander. They had nobody else there. And I didn't have too many officers. And these young recruits, they got savvy. They became very, very savvy. The ones that survived, they were as good as NCOs as you ever saw.
I'll tell you what, the impact that you had on those Marines as a company commander, when they see their company commander run off and do something like that, the energy and determination you put into them that day probably saved a lot of lives.
Yeah, but had I been in basic school, they probably would have kicked me out of there.
Oh yeah, for sure.
It's crazy. and I was somebody was looking over me so that I survived that. We had another incident where we came to a little village and we were trying to find out if they were okay. And after we talked to them for a while and everything was okay, I was walking out toward my Marines and I took a shortcut and I felt I kicked a cord and I heard a pop. And I thought, oh, geez, I'm in a minefield. There's no way I can get out of here. I've got seconds. And I just went down and curled up into a ball and said my prayers and thought I was dead. Well, after a while, nothing happened. So I rolled over and I found the cord I kicked. And I traced it underneath a bush. There are 3 M26 grenades tied together. And I had triggered them. I had activated them. And what happened was they have these heavy rains. They have rain season where they get over 30 inches of rain. Everything's underwater. And it must have...
flooded the grenades?
Yeah. And I said to myself, oh my God, somebody's watching over me. Thank God. I prayed. I said, thank you, God.
So was that the incident that you got the Navy Cross for?
No.
No?
No, here's the one. That's a big one.
Okay. Well, we can lead up to that. We continue on. We're not in a rush.
That's the one I really wanted to talk about, how the president screwed us up and killed a lot of people.
Well, let's walk up to that. So you've gone from that incident where you...
No. This is a different incident. All of a sudden, they told us, I got a call from a new commander. Your battalion or your company is moving forward to the DMZ right away. And there's another company, Bravo Company, is moving forward from where they are to the DMZ. And right away. And I thought, what the hell are they talking about? And I couldn't ask questions. He wasn't flustered, but he was determined. And I said, if they're up there, you don't want to put a gap between 2 units. You put those 2 units together as one and move forward. Like, if you leave a gap there and the enemy's in that gap, you're in trouble. So, there wasn't any room for discussion. And what this was, it came from Washington. They had high-level surveillance of the DMZ, and they saw a big unit, NVA unit, come across the water somehow, and they were up there and embedded in it. But they wouldn't tell us anything. They said, you go forward to the DMZ. So we go forward, and we cross that cleared bulldozer thing, and we got up there, and all of a sudden, a big firefight opened up with Bravo Company to our east. And I immediately turned because I wanted to help them. And it was a big firefight. And all the way across, I was taking casualties. They were hitting us with mortars. They had booby traps. They had people firing on us. And we couldn't move fast enough. And my battalion commander, he was in a bunker somewhere, urging me on, saying, you got to move faster. You got to get there faster. They're dying. The company commander's dead. And I said, Jesus, what can I do? I can't push these guys any farther or faster. And we finally got there. And it was a mess. I couldn't even find out where the Bravo Company was. They were scattered all over the place. And I had so many dead and wounded. I put them with one platoon, so I'd have 2 effective platoons. And I said, make sure you put a perimeter around them, and we'll get the helicopters in, get them out as soon as possible. So I took the other platoons and went forward, and all of a sudden, the whole countryside opened up on my 3rd platoon, the heaviest firefight I've ever seen. They were being assaulted by this NVA unit. So I said, geez, I don't even know where the Bravo Company is. I turned and went back to my 3rd platoon, and they were on us. And a huge firefight. And we did pretty well, but I realized with Bravo, they were totally ineffective if they were alive. The company commander was dead. And my 3rd platoon, there were the enemy was within their perimeter.
No.
And they were firing. We had firefights within their perimeter. And I said, whatever this has got to be a battalion or a bigger. And I called for help. I said, we need help. I asked for artillery, and I got the first round of artillery to adjust on the target. And there were artillery rounds popping up everywhere. They were mortar rounds hitting. It was like a nightmare. And I told the artillery people, cease fire into mission. I don't even know what round you fired for me. And so we fought, and we pretty well did a good job killing a lot of them that were inside our perimeter. And here comes this big battalion from 3rd Marine Division, and we were so glad to see them. When they got up to us, the enemy had pulled out. There was no more shooting.
So,
but they came in, and they saw all the dead and the wounded and everything else, and it was nightmarish.
Can we back up a little bit and kind of get into that firefight a little bit and the kind of the details of that?
Yeah. As we turned to try to find elements of Bravo Company to help them, keep them alive, and support them, and I had left a 3rd platoon with all of my dead and wounded. Mm-hmm. And we had fighters there too, and I wanted a helicopter to come in and take them. It was a bad decision. I should have kept them all together, but I didn't know what to do at the moment, And there were guys that were dying, and we could just barely carry them. And so we 1st and 2nd platoon and myself went forward, and all of a sudden, it's like the whole countryside opened up on my 3rd platoon. I heard a firefight I've never heard before, and I knew they were in trouble. So I stopped, and we moved back to support my 3rd platoon. We were being...
And you were with your 2nd platoon at this point. So you were with 2nd, 3rd was in contact.
Yeah. I was with my first and second.
Oh, first and second. Okay.
And I realized how big this enemy was, really big. And the battalion that came in was led by the battalion commander. I later found out that he had been in, the human wave action in, what was it, just south of China. He was.
Oh, and the landing, Normandy?
No, this was when we had these human waves thrown at us. And, well, anyway, he had been a trooper in a horrible human wave actions. And he was running scared, and he thought it was going to happen again. And so, but he was good. He was solid. He was there. And he came in and he picked us up, and we finally got all of Bravo's dead and wounded, which is about everybody, including his company commander, and my wounded and dead, and we got them evacuated. We found, for the first time, among the dead inside 3rd platoons, a rocket launcher that was meant to shoot down helicopters. First time we ever saw something like that. And we thought, wow, that's what they were after, our helicopters. But what they did with us, the remaining of my company, was we were attached to that battalion that came in, that was placed on the DMZ. And he was scared. He thought the DMZ was going to come alive. And you know what I discovered? That order to send us, these 2 companies, up to the DMZ came from Washington. Washington has high-level elevation scoping the DMZ.
Mm-hmm.
And every time they saw huge masses of troops, they didn't notify us, they told us how to deal with it. And what they were telling us was wrong. And our structure was crushed because all they did was obeyed. Wow. And thousands of Marines died because of that. And so I was behind them, and the battalion commander had me move forward in the event he's being attacked and fill in, just practice. And then we come back and we try to fill in our empty casualties list, but we never got them in time. Then here comes a new message. The new battalion commander, calls me up and he said, you are to get recon, and your company is to take recon up along the demilitarized zone to the west and place them in the low water crossing. And I said to myself, Jesus. He saw a mass of NVA troops coming across over there. And he wants my company, which was maybe half strength, to take recon out there all by ourselves. And I said, this is a death warrant. It'll be a lost company. There's no way we could survive. Look what just happened to us. And the battalion commander didn't understand where this was coming from. But he just said, obey. And I said, sir, I sense. This is the first time I didn't oppose him. I said, we're going to do it. We'll take them right away. But I sense we're going to run into a large NVA unit out there. I really do. That we won't be able to, we won't put a dent in them. And I said, I'll do it, but please give me another, a company. Give me some strength to fight with. And he gave me another company.
Oh, good.
And then I said, the last time I asked for help with artillery, it was denied. I said, I've got to have a priority in artillery. And he said, you've got it.
Good.
And I trusted him because he was scared. If they came through us, they would hit him. And so
One final check. All right, that looks good. Have fun.
Thank you, sir.
Oh, ready? I've got to go back to that one moment when I got that AK-47.
Yes.
That was really a fixed position. They didn't want to back off. They just wanted to fight us, and they powered us. And we even got a couple of tanks, and they would fire their anti-tank weapons, not knowing you don't fire it into their thick part, the front part. So they blister the front, and they couldn't knock out our tanks. And our tank machine guns were really giving them hell. We couldn't lower our tank guns, main guns, enough to shoot into the trenches.
Mm-hmm.
So they were useless. And but I always told my Marines, when we leave with everybody. We leave nobody behind. And there was some wounded and dead that were unaccounted for, and I saw their bodies out there, and I went out with a few people to check, and I got shot in the arm. So I called for one of my platoons to send a team out, and they picked up the bodies and accounted for all that were missing.
Was it through and through, or did it break your arm?
No, fortunately, it went through the flesh, and it didn't hit any bone. They put a compact on it, and it stopped the bleeding, and it was still functional. And I thought, great. So I stayed there overnight, which was a mistake, because my battalion commander said, the infection out here is phenomenal. You could lose your arm just from the infection. He made me get on a helicopter and go back. But in the meantime, we ran from the ground an attack of flight with napalm, and it wiped them out. It just wiped out the entire enemy. And it was so strong, that napalm was so hot and so strong that we could smell nothing but burned flesh.
I know that feeling.
We went in, and they had a morgue stacked full of bodies that were just all bubbling and burning. And it was nightmarish, really.
You never get that smell out.
No. And it was awful. The first time I'd seen it on the ground. And so that was done with. But I went back, and they cut a lot out of my arm. And I said, "You're cutting too much. It's all right." They said, we got to cut a lot of tissue away because you stayed out overnight. You exposed yourself to the germs. Then they sewed it up. They gave me the opportunity. You can go home now, or you can stay. And I said, I'm going to stay. So I went back and went through the other drills up to this order by my new battalion commander that I was attached to go out and take recon out where they could watch the low water mark going across the demilitarized zone. It all fell in place. It really fell in place. I knew exactly what was going to happen. The overflight had caught huge NBA unit mustering over there on their side of the demilitarized zone to come across there. So what Washington tells us to do is to send recon out, put them in an observation position where they could report if they come across. With my little half-strength company out there. And I thought, Jesus, we'll never survive. They're probably already across. And I said to myself, I don't want to say we're not going to do it. You know, we don't disobey an order. This is coming from our commander-in-chief. And the battalion commander didn't know. He hadn't been there long enough where it was coming from. So I told him, I suspect we're going to run across a large NVA unit out there. We're under strength. We're hurting. If we hit them, we're not going to survive. I ask for this. I ask for artillery, promise, priority of artillery to support us when we call for it. I ask for another company, or at least more people, so I can defend our team and get back. He said, you got it all. He says, you got it all.
So how many people in total did you leave there with?
My company was probably down to about 60, 50, 60, all young recruits mostly. And and he gave me another company out of a bunk forward base. I think they were probably maybe 80, 90, something like that.
And you didn't have very many NCOs?
No. But the ones I had, the ones that had survived all of this hell, they were good. They were good. I heard PFCs and Lance Corporals fighting for leadership positions. They were that good.
Wow.
And a couple of NCOs that came in, they ignored them. They said, these guys don't know what they're doing. We've been here through all of this hell, and these guys are having us do things that we don't supposed to do. So what am I supposed to do? You know, I just gave up on the NCOs. But I knew that recon were the best you'll ever find. They put themselves through hell. And
so it's your two companies and a recon platoon, or
there
company?
must have been 3 or 4. We took 3 or 4. And there was a recon officer that came in to my CP with me. And he wasn't calling shots, he was just observing.
That's a command post.
Yeah. And so I asked recon to lead us out and provide some flanking perimeter, you know, for observation, so that they were wise enough to see where we were going, and they were gonna miss an ambush or an encounter. And I really appreciate that. And they were good. They took us out. And here's the exciting part. We went out there and we found a 360-degree perimeter dug in fighting holes, empty.
Oh.
Beautiful fighting holes. I mean, the best. It would have taken us a week to dig those individual fighting holes, you know, little L's on them and everything else. And I said to myself, I know they taught me in school, you never go into the enemy's position, man the enemy's position. That's bad news.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, I'm desperate, you know. So we got in that position. And I had time to put the Marines into position, told them interlocking fire, all of this and that. We're going to be leaving shortly, but still, we got to be in an emergency for anything. A recon went over and found their positions of observation, and we were just about getting ready to leave when recon came up and said, they're coming across. They told us and higher up. They said, there's so many, I can't count them. Their density is tremendous, and they're running. They're running. They're coming across as they get on our side. The units are spreading out and running like hell to get to where they want to go. And I thought, Jesus, how long will it take them to get here? I can't get out of our position fast enough before they contact us. And I don't want to give up these positions.
Yeah.
So I told our Marines, we're going to have some visitors. And I told them this is payback. They really love that, payback. They don't know we're here. We're going to surprise the crap out of them, and we're going to blow them apart. And nobody pull back, no matter how intense it gets. Hand-to-hand combat, everything. Nobody pull back, because there's no place to pull back to.
Right. Yeah.
And then I thought, oh, geez. And I got, where's my artillery FO? My last
Your forward
artillery
observer.
forward observer, my officer, he's gone. He was wounded at the last fight. There was a Native American that was on his team, a radio operator. His name was Sankey. And he was a Arapaho. Hard charger, really a hard charger. He was probably only Lance Corporal. But he had been in every artillery mission that we had been involved in. He said, I can do it, I can do it. And he knew our coordinates and everything else. I said, okay, get a hold of artillery and let's pre-plan some rounds all around us, okay? And he did. We were supported, this was the best thing in the world, by an Army 155 self-propelled unit. And they were tough. They were good. I mean, bigger than I had ever had for artillery.
Right.
Know? And they helped him plot these prearranged locations for impact all around us before we even saw the enemy. And
how long was it from the time that Recon told you that these guys were moving to when you initially contacted them?
When I initially contacted
the enemy.
The enemy. That was something I was trying to figure out. How could we run and get back? And I said, no, we can't run. They would catch us, or they would harass the hell out of us. I think it must have been about half an hour, something like that.
Okay.
And they were so reckless that when they came across the DMZ, they broke off and ran, and half of them were still on the other side. They weren't waiting for the whole unit. They were excited. They wanted to get somewhere really fast, and I felt that was their weakness. But they kept coming across, and I felt if we turned and tried to get out of here with two companies, we would get caught. We would get caught, and they would tear us apart. And I've had enough of this. And so Sankey worked really hard setting up all of these points of impact in front of our lines. And then I told everybody, make sure you have nobody out in front of your lines for warnings, to see somebody coming and then come back in. I said, everybody's in. Everybody's a fighter. And they got that, got everybody in. Everybody's excited. And all of a sudden, they hit us. And we opened up. And I said, keep your ammunition, don't just waste ammunition. Hits count, hits kill. And our machine guns opened up, our M16s opened up. They were firing like mad. It was late afternoon. I think maybe 3 or 4, something like that. And I saw a missile fired from across the other side of the DMZ, and it went airborne. And I thought, well, why didn't it land on us? And I thought, oh, hell, surface-to-air missiles. And I got a call from back in the rear. I was reporting this to the battalion commander. And he said, an aircraft was coming in to support you, but he was shot down by a surface-to-air missile. And while you're out there, you will not receive any aviation unit.
Oh, gosh.
I said, what about for wounded and dead and resupply? And no, you're not going to get anything out there because they've got surface-to-air missiles, and this is a big outfit. And I thought, Jesus, that's a limitation. Sankey started firing, and it was beautiful. It was right on target, no adjustment necessary.
Good for him.
He was really stopping the whole scope of the attack, and breaking them up. And still, even through all of it, some of these Vietnamese got up and were throwing hand grenades at us. And not too far away, there was a young Lance Corporal who was the head of a fire team, and he was picking up these hand grenades, throwing them back because they were landing right into his fighting hole. One went off as it left his hand. It blew off his hand, and the concussion stymied him. But so he just kind of lay there, and he didn't bleed to death. And we picked him up in the end. He was still hanging in there, you know. And it was amazing. And Sankey, we must have been firing for 5-6 hours.
Oh, wow.
Sankey was firing all the time. I thought about, what about air? I could get the parachutes to light up the battlefield, but I would say that would be detrimental to us more than it would to them because they outnumbered us. They wanted to see where we were, and they couldn't see us because we were in bunkers. We were underground, you know, or in the ground. They were exposed, and they couldn't figure out what hit them. I couldn't figure whether they were coming from our position to man it, or if they were going to hit the battalion on the flank, but they were on our side of the DMZ. And I told the Marines again, nobody backs off because, you know, it's hand-to-hand combat. Fine, we'll beat them there, but there's no backing off. If you leave a hole in our line, they'll roll in and they'll kill us all. So don't allow it to happen, damn it. And they got that message. They knew it. But somebody said, there's a break in our line, a break in our line. And I said, plug it. You got to plug it right now. And I think I got down there, and I couldn't see any break in the line, but there was one Marine that was so scared, he came running out, and he climbed into my bunker with me. It was a bombshell, a bomb pit. And I said, what the hell are you doing? He says, Sir, I just wanted to report there's thousands of enemy out there. And I said, I know. He knew that he was so scared he was running away from it, didn't know where to go. But here's the thing, he came in handy. There was a cluster of trees, and they set up a mortar there. And it was very close to us, and they started mortaring us. And I said, you got an AK, you have that M79 grenade launcher? And he says, yes. He says, can you put a mortar round on where you see those rounds coming out of the trees? And he said, yeah, that's within my range. And he shut it down.
Good for him.
He shut down that mortar. And years later, the same kid called me and he said, sir, I just want to apologize. I've had to live with leaving my post. He says, I know I was scared. He said, I didn't know what to do. I thought I was going to die. He says, I want to apologize. He had to live with that. And I told him, we were all scared. We were all scared. And I forgive you. But even more important, you saved our ass by shutting down that mortar. Those type of things happen. You know?
You can't beat yourself up about those things.
And I was so proud of my Marines. They were sticking it out. And here's another thing. I had heard from the French before they pulled out and everybody else that the NVA had these huge, gigantic artillery pieces within close proximity to the DMZ. And we could never spot them because they were camouflaged or they rolled them out when they fired them. They wouldn't fire them at night because they knew we'd be able to see the flash and where their location was and destroy them. But these things were huge, like biggest things we've ever seen before. And they were accurate. They were always on target. And I said to myself, that means tonight they're not going to open fire on us with those big things. But I bet tomorrow morning they will, first light. So we've got to get out of here before first light. And After the darkness came, there was no more shooting. There was no more shooting on either side. But we were no doubt scared and alert. And I passed the word. Starting 3 o'clock in the morning, I want you to make sure that you got all your men and you pack your gear. We're going to be moving out of here before first light. And we'll carry our wounded and dead. And we're going to get back to the battalion without any more fighting and killing. And I want to report on the number of dead and wounded. And here's the thing that astounded me. There was one dead and one wounded, was that Lance Corporal that was throwing a grenade back. Those fighting holes were so good. And they were the only thing in a clear plain. The enemy were coming, they had no place to hide, no place to take shelter. And they couldn't even figure out where we were firing from. And it was so beautiful. And I said, well, tell me about the dead. They said, we had just gotten a staff sergeant had just joined the unit. I didn't even see him yet. And he had, for some reason or another, he went out ahead of the friendlies. And to be able to let us know that bad guys were coming. And he wasn't in contact with me. And so when they finally reached him and told him to get back in as soon as possible, we're going to be, the bad guys are coming. He came in and he was killed by friendly fire. And I felt so bad. I reported it as enemy fire.
So you could get benefits.
Because he was courageous, and our Marines were scared. They were keyed up. And I was astounded that that's all the casualties we had with those two.
And this
companies.
lasted 5 to 6 hours?
Yeah, of shooting.
And
yeah.
so this started probably, you said, about 4 or 5 in the afternoon.
Yeah.
And then about 3 o'clock in the morning, you guys started to pack up.
Yeah.
So when did the firing stop? Just when the sun went down, there was no clear.
Yeah, a couple of rounds fired when the sun went down, but basically we were glad to shut down, and so were they. They were hurt. There was no doubt about it.
Did that happen a lot? Was there a lot of, like, when the sun went down, the firing generally stopped?
Except for they were great mortar people. The enemy were superb mortar people. They would fire all night. Their mortars.
Oh, okay.
You know.
So
and, we were very fortunate. We were ready for them. There's the alertness was just superb. Nobody slept. We were ready, and I didn't want to use illumination unless it was necessary. I think Sankey probably said on call, illumination, if they tried to rush us.
Yeah.
But I didn't want them to see where we were. It was a nightmare to them.
So they didn't get into your lines.
They never got in our lines.
Wow, that's a testament.
That was wonderful. And then I called Recon, and I said, I thank you for your alertness, and you saved our ass, and you guys are just superb, living up to your reputation. And I said, we're going back. We got to go back because we're low on ammunition. We're not going to get any support from air at all, ammunition, food, whatever. And we're going to try to get back to the battalion without any contact. But we'd love to have you come along. I know you're under a different commander, to go out there and provide that observation of the low water point. But we'd love to have you come along. And a few minutes later, they called up and said, we're coming with you.
They said, screw that. I don't blame them at all. I would have been with them too.
He probably didn't even call his commander.
Oh, no. Yeah, that's a field decision right there.
Again, I said, please, provide point security and guidance on our flanks so that we don't get attacked or, we don't get sloppy. And he said, we'd be glad to. They were really good. And another thing I told all of the Marines, I said, we're going back. Recon is going to guide us in like they took us out here. If we even get fired upon, if we sight the enemy, we're trying to, I want to try to avoid contact. We've done our job, damn it. And we can't be locked into another long fight with these guys. And,
well, I would imagine that you guys were running low on ammo.
Yeah, we were running low on ammo. And it just all clicked together. So come time to leave, I said, all right, point, let's get out of here. And don't run, make sure you carry everything, you don't leave anything behind. And I said, I want to be out of here by first light. Well, I knew sometimes Marines screw up, so I stayed back with the rear element with the last, maybe the last platoon that was leaving. Just as the sun was coming up, I heard the big boom, boom, boom way off in the distance, like thunder. And I said, those are the big guns. Those are those big fucking guns I heard about, I used to hear about them in newsreels in Europe, and we've never seen anything that big. And I said, let's get out of here. And they started impacting on our position, right on target, blowing everything apart. And the last element immediately hit the ground. And I said, we got to get out of here. And they got up, and they ran like hell and got the rest of the team and moved out, and we didn't lose a man. But I turned back and I looked at our position, and it was just a big pile of dust, trees going airborne. I couldn't believe how lucky we were. And it's just like I thought. They wouldn't fire at night because they would be sighted by that high elevation, whatever.
Mm-hmm. Aerial surveillance.
Yeah. And so they were waiting until morning, and then they were going to unload, which meant that the ground elements, the North Vietnamese ground elements, weren't going to be there to attack us, which is a double plus for us. And we had to get out fast. I didn't have to argue with them to get out. And believe it or not, we got back safe.
Yeah, I wouldn't say that it was luck that you guys got out of there. It was a smart commander deciding to making that decision.
I was listening to all the things that I learned since I've been there on the ground. Mm-hmm. All of those funny little reports, stupid reports coming from Washington. Not only did they want to tell us, they didn't tell us that the NVA were coming across. They told us how to conduct our elements, how to counter them. And we didn't even know what the hell we were countering, Yeah. The command was one company take recon out to the low water crossing and place them so that they could be safe and observe. And then they could come back. We would have been the lost company. We would never come back. And I'm saying, how in the hell can Washington play Marine tactics? Take the authority and the training and everything else away from us and tell us how to run the show. They did it.
It's armchair quarterbacking.
I think the president was so upset that the way things were going in Vietnam that they wanted to get in the nitty-gritty. And he didn't know tactics.
Right.
Neither did the Secretary of Defense. And the Marine Corps was stymied. A lot of large Marine officers, generals, hit the... They were in trouble. They didn't know what to do. They didn't know who to turn to. And I said to myself, couldn't you have advised the Secretary of Defense? All he could do is say, do what we tell you to do. And, somebody should have advised them. And here's the bad thing. General Huckmoose helicopter was shot down and he died in combat. So I'm saying to myself, my maker up there is really taking care of me. The shot in the arm, the thing, the booby trap I kicked that was dud, all of those things. And I managed to stay alive. I went, there was an officer came in to replace me. We had a forward combat base called Con Thien, and a big bunker underneath it where the command center was. And I welcomed him and I introduced him to all the Marine leaders, and I said, these guys are good. And I told him about, Washington thing. I should have told her, the general, when he called me in, he gave me a Purple Heart, he had in his pocket and he says, tell me about what's going on out there. And
Let me tell you, sir.
Should I tell him everything that I suspect is happening? Didn't somebody tell him about Washington? And I thought, where's my loyalty? The chain of command? Should I? And I just said, it's combat as usual, sir. I regret that. I should have told him everything that I suspected was happening. And everybody was shattered by it. And that's why he was treated differently, too.
Why do you suppose that you decided not to do that? Not to tell him?
I don't know. I really don't know. And I know the general I first joined was glad to get out of there. Really.
Well, I'm sure you were glad to get out of there when you did, too.
Yeah.
So when you guys finally came home, talk to me about getting off that plane and the reception that you got.
Well, here's the thing. I told the battalion commander what happened, the whole thing, when we got back there. And the first thing he said was, how many did you kill? I said, sir, I know there's a policy that you don't report kills unless you go out and count them. And I said, I'd be damned if I would put one Marine's life in jeopardy to go out there and count the dead. I believe in these Marines. And so I asked the Marines that were on the firing line, I said, how many did you kill? One said, on the flanks. We know we got 3 or 4. We saw them. We dropped them. And in the center where the machine guns were, the young Marines, we killed at least 2 or 3 million. And I go, oh man, what do I do with this? And I said, 200. I just said 200. Well, I knew if I had said 400, that people would have gotten excited. But I did say, I think this was a reinforced battalion or more. There were a lot of numbers out there, and they were hungry, and they were running at us. And but I couldn't imagine how many we killed, It's like we had no casualties, except for one killed, one wounded.
Right.
But it was a fight. It was one hell of a fight. And
do you remember the name of that Marine that got killed? I know it's been a while, so you may not remember, but
I didn't even meet him. He had just come from a post, some kind of a post back east, or maybe it was even in Europe. He was assigned.
Okay.
And
anyway,
and my replacement came in. So I had at this forward combat base that we had been before. And there's really a horrible base because we had good firing positions and bunkers and everything else. But there was a firing artillery piece over on the other side of the DMZ that homed in that base. And I told him and everybody, I always told my Marines, when you hear the fire, you go for anything you can, but it's going to hit on you, on us. That that one artillery piece had the base homed in. And so when I heard it fire, it gave me just a couple of seconds to go for cover because it always impacted on the base, right on our base. It kept us at our toes. Nobody would ever go after it. And unfortunately, he was really a good replacement. He was experienced and it wasn't raw and he wasn't going to be crazy. But I was so happy that he was taken. I heard as I left later on, here came this round. He heard the round. He got down as deep as he could. It impacted and tore him apart. And later on, he died. And of all, since the time I was there, I was probably there, 6 months? 5 months? I don't know. I was there a little bit longer than normal. But I think all of the captains that got companies died except me. And again, I'm saying, why was I different? You know, somebody was watching over me. I felt so bad for him. And they all wanted to lead Marines in combat like I did. And the situation was so bad, just terrible. I never hated the North Vietnamese, but I would want to kill them because they're trying to kill me, and it was warfare. They were good. They were really good. When they fired their mortars and their artillery at us, they never had to adjust rounds. They were always on target. And I couldn't figure out how good they were. They were so good. They were brave and gutsy. And I guess after we left, I went, they wrote me up for a Navy Cross, which I got, but I read it, and it never described the situation as it really was. And I said, this is really great. I'm proud to have a Navy Cross for my unit. And I wrote up Sankey, the Arapaho, for a Navy Cross. I said, this guy deserves a Medal of Honor. He saved our assets. And I wrote it up, sent it in, nothing. He never got anything. Because maybe they wanted to keep it quiet. They didn't want to pat an Arapaho on the back. I don't know. So he wanted his tribe to be proud of him for what he did, the Arapaho tribe. And he went to Washington, and he found the award section, and he found a lieutenant there that was working in the award section. And he told the lieutenant about the write-up and everything else. The lieutenant called me, and I asked the lieutenant to make him an exception. This guy saved 2 companies and stopped the big assault with that artillery that he called in. He was my artillery FO guy. He's a Native American, and he got the Silver Star.
Oh, good. At least he got that.
And then I had the pleasure of being called in to the Arapaho Nation. It was just outside of Kansas City, and they had the big ceremony. And I was so proud of him.
When was that?
Oh, that was maybe a month or so later. No, it was probably a year later.
Have you been in contact with him after that?
He died.
He did die.
He told me he was going to die, and I didn't want to press it. Maybe it was some kind of a sickness or something.
Oh, maybe he got cancer or something.
Yeah, something. But he knew he was going to die. And his family and his nation danced, and their ceremony was so good. They were so proud of him.
Good. Good.
But I was saying to myself, I wrote up the guy that had his hand blown off, and he got, I think, the Navy Cross. But in all of the write-ups, there was no mention of the White House involvement, what they gave us, what they did to us or for us. They all localized the incident down to just a little firefight. Like my Navy Cross, the incident was, it was just a firefight between us and an oncoming enemy force. They didn't back up and talk about, you know, how we were ordered to go out there and spy them with recon, and how, you know, this company, why it was known to come across. It wasn't a company, it was a battalion or a regiment. It was huge. And they whitewashed everything that had an indication that the White House had anything to do with it. And that pissed me off.
Oh, I bet.
The politics were terrible.
Yeah, and they still are. So that kind of goes hand in hand with how you guys were treated when you came back. And I want to touch on that because it's important that people understand how the veterans of the Vietnam War were treated.
All veterans.
Yeah, well, more so you guys at that point, the Iraq veterans like myself, we were celebrated when we came back, and that's more than I can say for what you guys did. So can you kind of talk about that and how
I was celebrated within the Marine Corps.
Mm-hmm.
They knew what we did, and the word was out. But it was just little groups. You know, I wasn't promoted to colonel, and I know a lot of colonels that hadn't seen that kind of action, but they were good, and they always found a good duty stations for me, so I stayed in for a while, challenging, and we moved around a little bit, and I always got together with my Marines from that company.
How did the American public treat you?
Very well.
Did they?
Very well. They didn't understand everything, but they treated me very well.
Oh, good. That's not the case for a lot of Vietnam vets.
I wish I could have done more for my Marines, and even 84. A lot of them are. I'm 84 years old. A lot of them are not alive, but I get on the phone and talk to some of them, and they're starting to disappear. We hope to have a reunion, maybe a last reunion with 9th Marines, maybe in this coming fall at Paris Island.
Wow, that would be amazing.
Yeah, it would be. And I would try to get there if I could still exist and fly. It's the politics was really bad. And just being in Vietnam was really bad. I hated to see what the little villagers were taking a beating and going through.
Yeah.
We came across a cache of rice once, and I knew there was a village that had been vacated, and the people were starving and hurting. And so we carried that rice and found them. And we had a chow line, dished out the rice to these people. And it wasn't enough to go around. So I knew the Marines carried extra chow. When the chow came out, sea rations are heavy.
Right.
And they don't want to carry that stuff all day. So I said, let's give them the sea rations that we're willing to give them. All I ask is you open up the can, so if the bad guys come along later on, it's been contaminated, And so we opened up the cans. These guys gave them all of their sea rations. And I was so proud of them, And these people finally had a good meal, for themselves and their families. And
wow.
That kind of stuff warms my heart.
Yeah.
I always loved the Vietnamese people. They were always very nice. They even invited us back years later. Somebody said, come back and I'll arrange for you to go see where those big NVA guns were that they rolled out. They rolled out of tunnels and fired them, and then they rolled them back in the tunnels. We'll show you where that is. And I had enough of it. Oh, I went into this, there's an organization that high ranking, not high ranking, but people that get Medal of Honor and the crosses and the different services, an organization that belongs to. I forgot the name of it. But I was reading their blurb, and some Air Force generals were saying, telling the story. Toward the end of the war, before we pulled out, the president was so intent on getting the communists to sign off and say, we won, and back off and leave us alone, instead of sending us away as losers. He ordered the Air Force to bomb Hanoi with all of the big bombers and everything else, even though Hanoi was loaded with surface-to-air missiles. They lost so many aircraft, so many airmen. Some of the airmen bailed out. Some of them crashed with the bombers, and were missing in action for years and years. The Air Force took a horrible beating, trying to do what the president ordered them to do, simply to save the president's image and his ass.
That's ridiculous.
Thousands and thousands of servicemen died there because of what the president did. It's one thing to do high-level surveillance and tell us where they are and let us maneuver our own action. And another thing, at his level, to tell us what to do. For example, move 2 companies forward to the demilitarized zone right now. Not telling us what he saw, what was there, anything like that.
Yeah, that's ridiculous.
How bad is that? Or take 1 company with recon and go out there to the west, the low water mark on the DMZ.
Yeah, 1 company.
1 company.
And a half a company at that.
Yeah.
That's
and he
ridiculous.
had no idea what was going on in the ground, but he's playing field tactics. And I'm going, oh, my God. I say, don't ever let the White House do that again.
Yeah.
Don't ever do that.
Well, let's go ahead and...
Fortunately, Gorbachev came along later on, and he stopped the communist takeover of the world. He said, no more.
Yeah.
And that saved Vietnam, I guess.
Well, we'll wrap the podcast up here, but
I sometimes I don't sleep at night. I think of the people that died, some of the decisions I should have made. And, it came to a time where the only time I got good leadership was when somebody insisted that they wanted to be with a fighting battalion, fighting Marines. Otherwise, they were assigned somewhere else. And I'm so proud of my Marines. I really am.
you need to be proud of yourself too, because the fact that you were cognizant enough in a situation where so many Marines could have died, but you made the conscious decision to back out of there when you did, knowing what was coming, says it's a testament to who you are and who you were as a leader and who you are as a leader for that matter. So you need to be proud of yourself in that as well. So I know we're our own worst critics, because I'm the same, but
I believe it in you. I really do. Had you been a Marine in my position, you would have done the same thing.
but the thing is, but you were that Marine and you made that decision and you saved all those soldiers' lives, all those Marines' lives.
Yeah. And somebody was looking over me.
Yeah.
So many company commanders died so fast, and I lost my general, I could have been flying with him if I had stayed. And that booby-trapped I kicked and all those things.
God had your back.
Yeah. And I was so glad to return to my beautiful, loving bride. And we've had a good life hereafter, And I'm not particularly religious from the point of view of going to
Church.
Ceremonies, but I really believe in God. I really do, and I thank Him.
Well, that's your walk with God, nobody else.
And I still love the Marine Corps. I'm glad to hear the Marine Corps' changing a little bit in that they'll accept minority groups as officers.
Yeah. Yeah, they've definitely come a long way from all of that.
The Army and the Air Force were well ahead of us on that. The Marine Corps the officer corps seemed to go for glory.
Right.
And but I saw it in our fighting Marines. They were wonderful.
Well, Al, thank you so much for telling this story.
Well, I thank you for hearing it.
Absolutely. It's an honor to be able to sit here and listen to you.